Welcome to r/entitled people, HOA edition, where I've got 3 stories for you that have to do with HOA people and entitled people. This is going to be a wonderful video, so strap in and like, subscribe, and leave a comment on the video. Maybe share it around so YouTube gets me seen by people. Now, without further ado, let's get started. HOA sells non-HOA house. So I'll start by saying this happened to a friend of mine a few years ago, so I don't know all the details. I'll spare the boring details, but we lived in a small rural farming community that has been growing quite rapidly lately. A lot of farmers are growing old and selling their farmland. There are 2 ways to do this. They can either split it into lots and sell it a piece at a time. This typically brings in more money, but is a much slower process. Then they could sell the whole thing at once. Again, faster process, less money. This particular farmer decided to sell his land in lots because it was in a developing neighborhood, and he could make a much larger profit doing it that way. My friend bought in a few lots and built a very nice house on it. Then a large company came in and bought most of the remaining lots and built a subdivision on the land. In order to keep everything in a consistent look, they themed the properties after my friend's place. He was a lot nicer, obviously. He didn't cheap out on it like they did, but they had a similar style to his. He didn't mind because that just raised his property value even more. Now, it is important to note that my friend basically lived right in the center of the subdivision. He bought a place in the middle of the property because of its view. Probably not the best idea in retrospect. The people who built the subdivision also founded an HOA. My friend was invited to join on multiple occasions, but he always refused for obvious reasons. Because of some legal clauses about pre-existing properties, he wasn't required to join, even though he was in the center of the subdivision. He did maintain a pretty good relationship with the HOA president, and some members of the community as well. He was regularly invited to HOA events, and sometimes actually took them up on the offer. He enjoyed it, and then a new president took over the HOA. I guess the new president didn't really do any research because he just assumed that my friend was part of the HOA. He contacted my friend about several violations that he noticed along with late fees due to the HOA. When my friend tried to explain he wasn't a part of the HOA, the new president just shooed him off and ignored him. My friend probably just ignored all the fees, fines, and so on. Now, my friend was a winter bird. For anyone who doesn't know what that means, it's a fancy way of saying someone that lives in the south during the winter and the north during the summer. They typically own 2 houses, or sometimes they've retired and jump around between family members that are happy to take care of them for that time. My friend in particular was a doctor who worked for a hospital here in the summer months and a hospital in the south in the winter months. So it all worked out. So saying this, you could probably imagine the horror on his face when he came home and found all of his locks changed and another family living in his house. The HOA president knew he traveled south every year, so he waited until he was gone, then sent an eviction notice for all his late fines. He had a friend of his own a realty firm sell the house and moved in a new family, all while my friend was gone. My friend contacted a lawyer friend from back in the south and started the process of suing the HOA. Big city lawyer versus small town HOA. Who was absolutely in the wrong? Guess who won? Did I mention the family that moved into my friend's house joined in as well? They also sued the HOA because they had to be relocated on short notice, and they had taken out a very hefty loan for that property. I don't know exactly what happened, but I know the HOA president lost his house and skipped town. I'm guessing he probably took the brunt of the attack. Entitled Crazy HOA President. Just before leaving active duty military, after almost 10 years, my wife and I bought a large house in my hometown. on the coast in a nice neighborhood with an HOA. I had never lived in an HOA before and never knew how bad, cliquey, or political it could be. Not long after we moved in, the letters started about having a boat in our driveway. Mind you, we lived not 100 yards from the water. So we complied and placed it in a local marina. After living there about 2 years, the neighbors we had, which were all really great, moved and a new older couple moved in. They were really nice at first, letting my children swim in their pool, sharing an adult beverage in the evening, talking on the fence, so on. And then it happened. The wife ran for and became the new HOA president. She started walking around the neighborhood and taking notes. She would walk into people's yards and make corrections, and even go so far as to trespass into people's backyards, gated or not, and take pictures of violations and send out letters. I came home one time to find her on my back porch looking at things and taking pictures. I was a police officer at the time, and while trying to be nice, informed her she could get into a lot of trouble for what she was doing. She tried to tell me as an HOA president she was entitled to go into people's private property and even their houses to inspect them if need be. I informed her of the state and federal laws against this, and it started a war. I immediately started receiving $100 fines for very minor issues with my home. I fixed the issues immediately and never had to pay the fines with the HOA property management company, but did file complaints. The HOA PM company never did anything about the complaints. And then it happened. I also owned a small business for which I had a truck and trailer I would use across the business day. I had this parked in front of the house one day, and she took a picture of it. According to HOA rules, it was not allowed to be there overnight, and never was. I received a letter and a fine for $100 stating that the vehicle had been parked there overnight. This time I asked for a review with the HOA board of directors, the PM company, the attorney, and my attorney. This was going to cost the HOA, PM company, and all involved much more than $100 in time and money. At this meeting, I asked the HOA president to present evidence other than one picture that this vehicle was here more than 24 hours, with time and date stamps, and she could not. I then asked for the $100 to be dropped. The HOA board and PM company refused. I was publicly berated by the HOA president in front of the board, and my attorney saying I should be a good soldier and do as I was told by the HOA board and obey the rules. At this point, my attorney and I had enough evidence of harassment due to recording the conversation. We then informed everyone in the room that we'd been recording everyone, and this inflamed them more, and they threatened to call the police for violating the law. In our state, it was more than legal and well within our rights. We then informed them we would be filing a lawsuit which was sure to win out and would bankrupt the HOA. According to state law and the HOA bylaws, in the event the HOA ceased to exist or became bankrupt, each and every one of the 35 houses in the HOA would have their mortgages immediately due and payable. Most people don't know this exists in a lot of HOA covenants. We just got up and walked out of the meeting and said we think this settles the matter and hope there'll be no further fines, threats, harassment, and so on. I had very good friends in the neighborhood and did not want to see their families affected. About a month later, the HOA had elections for a new HOA board. I informed several people in the neighborhood I would be running for HOA board president. We got together on the night of the board meeting and election we attended, and there were only about 10 people in there to vote. There were 6 people, along with myself, who voted for me, but miraculously, the incumbent HOA president had a unanimous vote when property management company chair counted the votes. Right there in the meeting, I asked all 6 people who voted for me to raise their hand with me, and that was 7. And the PM chair had no answer, since it had already been entered into the corporate minutes. I said it would be fine. It let it stand, and then informed everyone in the room about the previous meeting, mortgages, suing the HOA, and now calling the state attorney general's office. Within a short time, the property management company was changed out. The HOA president was replaced with a nice level-headed gentleman, and I never ever so much as heard a peep from the HOA ever again. I played by the rules more or less, but eventually sold the house and moved on. Never mess with a paratrooper. And now for the title story. Vindictive ex-wife illegally signed application to local HOA in my name. I'll start this off by saying my ex is vindictive as hell. We've been fully divorced since right about the pandemic started. We sold the house we shared, and I didn't have to pay her alimony because she cheated and we were in at-fault state. It was messy since D-Day. All the stereotypes. First the sobbing, and then the trickle truth saying, "I love you. It was just one time. Okay, it was 2 years." And then the gaslighting followed by, "I'm gonna take you for everything," before packing her shit and walking out. I feel like I never really knew the woman my ex was in all the time we were together. We were married 5 years and together for 7, and in 2 of those 5 married years she had affairs with 3 other men. The final one being a foreign businessman of some sort, from what I could find out. Yes, I got tested for STDs and was thankfully negative. Yes, she got pregnant by the final affair partner. And no, I didn't sign the birth certificate because I found out about all the affairs before the baby was born, thanks to a call from the first affair partner. My ex tried to go full scorched earth on me, but since we live in, and were married in, an at-fault state, she lost. We didn't pay equally into our house, and the equity was divided 70-30, so I got a pretty good cash payout when I sold our marital home, to put as a down payment on a different home closer to my job. It's a bit of a downgrade, but suits a single guy in his 30s like me just fine. My ex did show up to my house once, but I refused to let her in. She complained at me that I'd financially ruined her in the divorce. I said that she was fully willing to do that to me first, and she had the audacity to say that it should have been my life screwed over, not hers. I laughed so hard and said that it was karma. She yelled that she'd sue me for what was rightfully hers, and I said, if she was going to sue me, then go ahead, sue me. It'd end up the same way in court because she has nothing but a false sob story. She was the cheater, not me. I'm no angel, but I didn't do anything to her. And she was the one who ruined our marriage. She then said she'd tell everyone she could that I abused her. And I said I'd sue her for defamation if she did. And I was recording our current interaction and had those words saved to my phone. She went wide-eyed and her jaw dropped. The look people are calling the surprised Pikachu face. Then I asked why she was there, if not to try and make trouble, because she had a new man in her life that knocked her up. She just huffed at me and said he isn't around much, and she's stuck in a tiny apartment, living off his child support till he comes back. It was immature of me, I know, but I did the bit of playing the world's smallest violin. She yelled at me for me to go sodomize myself, and I yelled back that I'd sooner do that than her any time. She raged at me, and then got in her car to leave. I haven't seen her since. There's an HOA in my neighborhood, but I was not legally obligated to join it, because the last owner in my house was not a member. I made sure of that through a real estate lawyer as well. The HOA had no grounds to force me to join, and were not happy about it. The HOA president would show up with forms every week for the first month, demanding I sign them. And then she threatened to take me to court, to which I had to get a cease and desist sent to her from my lawyer to make her stop that. So she started harassing me by looking for any infraction she possibly could to report to the city. An inspector came out several times and found nothing wrong. In fact, I offered one of them a burger, and while grilling, and they graciously accepted. Did I mention the HOA hates barbecues and parties that aren't approved in advance? Well, they do. And I like to grill when the weather is good, and my neighbors actually love me for it because I invite them over. I had the police called on me several times for noise complaints because I was playing music on a Saturday afternoon while having my friends over. The HOA president and I caught trespassing once she was trying to peer into my windows. I called the police, but she denied ever doing it, so I got cameras, and she hasn't trespassed since. But I still got repeated passive-aggressive letters saying my cameras were not an approved addition to my house. Some months ago, I started getting letters for fines in the mail, and when I contacted the HOA, their representative claimed they had it on record that I joined, and needed to pay all fines effective immediately. I told them that was not possible. They then emailed a scanned copy of all forms, and they had a signature on them, but it was not mine. It was similar in some ways, and I recognized right away that as being my ex's handwriting. She knew what my signature looked like, but it was a loose imitation at best. I got in touch with a lawyer right away over the forged signature, but the HOA still demanded to go to court, and it took 7 months before that happened. Meanwhile, they were stacking unpaid fines against me weekly, and were threatening to put a lien on my house. We went to court, and the HOA president looked very smug. But my lawyer pointed out how the signature wasn't the same as mine, and was very inconsistent in the various forms. I'd never allowed the HOA president into my house, and I've never requested the forms. The idiot HOA president actually slammed her palm on the table and said it was still binding. But when pressed where the fraudulent signature came from, she admitted my ex-wife called the HOA, and they sent her the forms, and then got them back in the mail signed. But then she actually claimed that she thought I'd signed them. The judge looked at her and asked if she was serious. She confirmed she was. The judge then asked how a woman I was no longer married to, that had never even lived with me in my current residence, was supposed to have any bearing on whether or not I joined her HOA. She went quiet, and I could see the, "oh, shit," look on her face as the hamster wheels were turning, and she seemed to finally mentally put the pieces together. My lawyer then counterclaimed what the HOA did was blatant fraud and legal actions must be taken. And oh boy, were they. I countersued the HOA for the emotional distress of the harassment I'd gotten since moving in, which I had lots of proof of. That won me about 10 grand after lawyer fees that I decided to put towards my mortgage. The HOA president was removed from a throne as well. I like to think she was kicking and screaming. She was also slapped with a hefty fine. I've seen her outside a few times, and she always looks at me like I'm the devil. The HOA itself had to pay all of my legal fees, too. I wanted to go after my ex for forging my signature, but can't because not long after she forged my signature on those forms, she apparently left the country to be with her third affair partner. She's somewhere in Europe from what I can see on the final posts of her Facebook before she disappeared. So I can't do anything against her unless she ever returns to the US. So that was a wash. I'm not getting letters from the HOA anymore, though, and the new president has promised to keep things completely cordial from now on. I still don't feel like I got much of a win in this, though. Other than the 10K payout, it all felt like a huge waste of time. Well, that's the end of today's video. I hope you all enjoyed the stories I had for you. Remember to like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Maybe share the video with some of your friends. And I will see you all next time. Hasta la pasta. Oh, fuck. I just blew myself up! No! Okay, that was fun. That was fun. Gonna end